Hello everybody and welcome to The Bottom Line. Today I have something a little bit different for you. Instead of just me raving and ranting about stuff that I find interesting, I have a partner in crime. Ankit, who's joining me on Zoom from Bangalore today to discuss a whole lot of stuff focused on the UFC and MMA. We're going to talk about the packed UFC 266, 267 and 268 cards, all the action that's coming up in the UFC over the next couple of weeks. Ankit's a dear friend of mine. I think I can take a little bit of credit for introducing him to the sport. And he's a man that I discuss MMA with every opportunity that I get. So without further ado, hi Ankit, thanks for joining us. And let's just jump right into it. What are you excited about on this 266 card? What are you looking forward to? Let's hear from you.
I'm looking forward to all the fights, to be frank with you. But the one I look forward to the most is the one most people are looking forward for. I look forward to the Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler fight a lot. And what do you think about that fight?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. I think everyone's looking forward to Nick Diaz's return. Before we get into that, I have a quick update for you. I don't know if you've heard this, but Diaz's camp has sent a message out to Dana White saying they don't want to cut to welterweight, so they want to have the fight at 185.
I have,
Yeah.
which is a really disappointing thing because it's like a last minute change from what they had decided. And I can't even believe that they're doing something like this, to be frank with you, because I think it was to be a welterweight fight right from the beginning.
170. It was supposed to happen at 170. This has happened in the last 12 hours, I think, that he sent a message to Dana White saying, we want to cut, he doesn't want to cut to 170. He wants to have it at 185. They haven't heard back from Robbie yet, but it's basically down to what Robbie wants to do now.
Robbie's never fought at 185.
I don't think so. I mean, he used to be the elite XC middleweight champion. Now, I don't know if that was at 40, if it was 185 or they had a different weight class and called it middleweight, but he was the elite XC middleweight champion back in the day. But
how long ago was that?
That was some time ago. I mean, that was when Robbie still had hair, so that was some time ago.
And he's been at welterweight ever since.
He's been at, I think it's fair to say that Robbie is a welterweight. He was the welterweight champion. He's been a welterweight most of his career. So let's put that aside. Let's hope that the fight happens whether at 170 or 185. What do you think is going to happen in that fight? Nick Diaz is coming back after 6 years. He wasn't very active when he left. And his last fight was versus Anderson Silva. What do you think is going to happen come fight night?
So I've been watching a bit of pre-fight videos of both. And Robbie Lawler looks really, really good physically, like he always does. Diaz, not so much. So in terms of the way they look, I would give it to Robbie because he's looking like the guy who's in much better physical condition. And I think from what you're telling me and what I read, I think Nick Diaz probably attempted his weight cut and couldn't get it done, which also sort of points to him not being in the best physical shape possible. So I think I would give it to Robbie Lawler. I think the bookies, I think those guys give it to Nick Diaz is what I saw last. But it's a fight really difficult to call because how do you call this fight? We're talking about a guy who hasn't fought since I think for the last 5 years.
6 years. He's been out for 6 years. I think the last fight versus Anderson Silva was 2015 or 16. So whatever that timeline is, it's a really long time since he fought. And it's hard to disagree with you. Yeah, it's hard to disagree with you. I mean, I know I said Robbie has been a shadow of his former self in the recent past, but that's against people like Kobe Covington. And, he got unlucky against Ben Askren, but though that's against like killers of today. Nick Diaz, like you said, I saw a picture of him. I saw a video of him practicing with those weighted batons on a beach somewhere. Nick looks like he has aged. He does not look like the Nick Diaz of old. He's wearing his age quite poorly. And I thought for a guy who's been out for so long, he might actually look fresh because he's not being beaten up like Robbie is. But truth be told, he doesn't look like he's in the best shape. Physical appearance wise, he doesn't look the best.
Doesn't look the best. In fact, physical. That's why that was the first thing I brought up. Physical appearance wise, he actually looks bad. if you ask me. And even I saw him pick the bag, I saw him run. He looks like a really, really frail guy. On the other hand, Robbie Lawler looks really good, like he always does.
Yeah.
He's cut, he's big, he's muscular. I think he looks good. I actually have a feeling I would give this to Robbie Lawler because apart from, in terms of skill set, in terms of form, like you pointed out and like I pointed out earlier, there's absolutely there are no pointers when it comes to those things. And another thing I want to ask you is what goes into a bout agreement? Do they decide what weight they're going to fight at?
No, of course. There's a set of rules. Now, the gloves and things like that is standard. That's baked into your UFC contract. I don't think you can deviate from that. But weight class, of course, you agree at a weight class. I think which is why the conversation is Nick Diaz sending a message saying, or his team sending a message saying, can we please do this at 185? And then Robbie has to agree because it's the guy standing across from him in the octagon. Let's see what Robbie has to say. I have a feeling, I mean, if I know Robbie Lawler and his attitude to these things, he's going to say, fuck it, let's go and finish this. I don't have to cut weight. Big shit. Because you know what? I think Robbie Lawler walks around at about 185. So if he's getting to avoid the cut in any case, he might say, you know what? Screw it. I don't want to do it. And this weight cutting stuff, I think it's on his way out anyway. They might end up upgrading everyone one weight class just to get this whole weight cutting nonsense out of the way. But yeah, I agree. So that's the big one. That's out of the way. We know what you think about Nick Diaz, Robbie Lawler. What else has got you excited on the card?
The main events got me a little excited, obviously, because if you see Ortega, he's been an absolute killer. Walt defeated only once, and that too against Max Holloway. And Volkanovski is undefeated for a very long time. I think he suffered an L earlier in his for MMA career, and after that he's been completely flawless. And he smashed the guy Brian Ortega lost to. Styles make fights, and he absolutely decimated. He beat. I think Volkanovski won both fights. That's my opinion against Max Holloway.
The second fight as well? You think Volko won the second fight as well?
I'm quite sure Volko lost the first round. I think it was 50-50 the second round, but I think Volkanovski really grew into that fight. Now, this is a controversial subject, whether a takedown that doesn't result in any significant damage or ground and pound should actually result in a fighter winning a round just because of a couple of takedowns, but that's what we've seen from judges. That's what we saw against John Jones and who's that? Against John Jones and Reyes. That's what we saw. Jones got a couple of takedowns at the end of the fight, and that's what actually made him win the fight. And I think that's what got Volkanovski the fight.
I agree. I mean, it's not a street fight situation. It's a sport. It has rules. And if takedowns count for a certain value in the fight, and even otherwise, I mean, think about when there are two men, one's trying to impose his will on you. If I can grab a hold of you and take you to the ground and you can't stop me, I think that shows that physically in that certain aspect, I'm better than you. And I think it should score more points. So I don't completely disagree with that either. And yeah, I think it's going to be a very competitive fight. Brian Ortega's back in action. Volko, both guys have some serious skills. A great gas tank, so we're not going to have any dearth for action over 5 rounds. So that one's exciting as well. And there's another update. We don't know 100% if the Dan Hooker fight will happen. Because of the COVID issues, there's been news that Dan barely got his visa, but he's got his visa. But the other guy, Nasrat Hakparast, who's coming from Germany, has not yet confirmed his availability and the fact that he's going to be able to make the event. So fingers crossed. That's going to be another exciting fight. What do you think about that? What's your opinion on that fight?
That was honestly going to be my third fight. Okay. And the reason that's going to be my third most anticipated fight for me is because I think it's a make or break for Dan Hooker. He was a guy who came in with a lot of promise. He had an absolutely fantastic start. And then what happened is he suffered a couple of L's. And now I think his narrative is going to be decided a lot by this fight. I think if he does well in this fight, he could be back on track. And if I think and I think if he doesn't do too well in this fight, the narrative could be that after a war which he went through, Dustin, he couldn't quite recover from that, and that's what's causing this whole thing. And that could actually put him out from title contention from quite some time. So I think Dan Hooker's taking a big risk by fighting an unranked guy. So generally, this whole fight business is like the stock market. Guys' stock keeps going up and down, and everyone's very careful about what they take and what they refuse. So generally, when Dan Hooker fights and when any top 10 guy or a top 5 guy fights an unranked guy, it is in a way a no-win situation for him. And they don't do it unless they have to do it. Because look at it logically. If Hooker wins, it means he beat an unranked guy, which doesn't mean too much anyways, right? And many times that guy and the unranked guy swap places in terms of rankings, right? Hooker's definitely going to lose a few spots if he loses to this guy. And I think this guy might come into top 10 if he beats Hooker. Not top 5, but I think maybe top 10 or touching distance from on top 10 is definitely what this guy is going to come back.
Oh, for sure. I think he's unranked at the moment. If he beats Dan Hooker, he's definitely going to get a top 15 spot, maybe a top 10 or close to top 10 spot. So I agree with that. And let's see what happens. And I think, they have this unwritten or unspoken rule in the UFC that if you lose 3 in a row, unless you're a very special superstar, that basically means you're going to be on your way out. And Dan lost the fight versus Poirier. He got smashed by Chandler in his last outing. So this is number 3. And they've dropped the standard considerably. He's not fighting a top 5 sort of championship contender this time. But we'll see how he performs against Nasrat, and I hope that fight happens, because I think it's the lightweight division. There's no dearth of action, but this is a crucial piece in sort of the mid to lower section of the ranked hierarchy in that division. So we'll see what happens. So those are the 3 big fights. Those are the ones that I'm most excited about as well.
So one more thing. Now I know I'm moving away from the fight and I'm focusing more on the business thing. Yeah. But that's also another reason why it's really bad. So by the way, I agree with your statement, but I think the guys who lose 3 and are out are mostly older guys. Example, Tony Ferguson could be on his way out. Dan Hooker, if he actually fought a top 5 guy or maybe a top 7 guy, because he's young and because he has a good track record before he started losing, he actually wouldn't be on his way out. Because look at it logically. He lost to Poirier, who's number 1 contender. He lost to Chandler, who fought for the title, correct? Right after he beat. Absolutely. So they're going to look at it as, look, you lost to absolute killers. You lost to top 3, top 5 type of guys. And I think if he lost to another top 5, top 6 guy, he'd still have a chance to hang around. But if he loses to this guy, I think he's done. I think he's really done. And that's why I think it's a bad deal for him. But let's see. I think Dan Hooker's a damn good fighter. And I think he should take this one. That's my opinion.
I think so too. Let's hope that happens. But you know who I'm really excited about? And this I came across actually while I was trying to make my my original video, the breakdown. I was actually glazing over the fights and I came across this man, Chris Daukaus. So this is his 4th fight in the UFC. It's the first fight on the prelims. He's taking on Shamil Abdurakhimov. And he has won his last 4 fights by first round KO. Now the last 3 of those are UFC fights. So his UFC debut, fight number 2 and fight number 3, he knocked out all his opponents in round 1. The first 2 opponents, I forget who they are. They're not as well known. But opponent number 3 was Alexei Olenek, the boa constrictor, the guy with 75 plus professional fights. And though Alexei didn't go out, the referee had to save him. I mean, on his feet, the referee had to save him. But man, Chris Daukaus can move. For a man that big, for like a 240, 250 pound man with a dad bod, which a lot of these heavyweights don't really look like athletes, you could get caught off guard. But man, that guy can move. He's got hands, dude. I haven't seen combos and movement and footwork like that in the heavyweight division in a long time. That guy's exciting. So I'm quite pumped for that fight. We'll see how his performance comes in. And then of course we've got Andrade, we've got Shevchenko. A lot of stuff happening on that card. So fun evening. What else are you looking forward to? I know the UFC's got some really power packed stuff coming up in the next couple of months. I think 267, 268, two back to back big cards, four title fights, a bunch of other stuff. What else are you excited about in the near future?
And my favorite fight in the near future is Covington versus Usman, or Usman versus Covington, I should say, because Usman's a champ. So I think Usman versus Covington is definitely what I'm looking forward to. I absolutely cannot wait for that. And it was, if you ask me to pick my favorite fight of last year, it's Usman versus Covington. So for me as a fight fan, that is absolutely gold standard. I like something like Masvidal versus Askren, but Usman and maybe Masvidal versus Askren is the type of fight that generally gets more eyeballs. But for me, Usman versus Covington was an absolutely brilliant fight. It was a fight where both guys left everything in the octagon, and I think that's what made that fight. I think both guys left everything in their octagon. The Kobe Covington had his jaw broken midway through the fight. And if anyone's ever been hit on the jaw, just a hit, you know how it stuns you and you know how it feels. Now just imagine if there's a break in the bone over here. It's going to be like being stunned for your entire sort of, it's like being stunned for the entire fight and for the entire period. It's like having a constant sort of hit on the jaw. And that guy went out there, and if you remember the start of round 4, I think he broke his jaw in round 3, or who knows when he broke his jaw. We heard him tell his corner man he broke his jaw in end of round 3. He came out in round 4 to win the fight. I don't know if you remember this.
Oh, that man's a savage, absolute savage. He, in fact, protested against the referee when the referee stopped the fight. He still wanted to go. Kobe Covington's got no give, man. Absolutely no give. But here's what I'm thinking. Like you said, I agree. Kobe gave it his best shot. He gave it his best shot, but he walked out with a broken jaw and a stoppage loss in round 4. And Usman's arguably only gotten better, if that's even possible. Do you think Usman's got his number, or do you think Kobe's going to come back with something interesting, something that Usman hasn't seen before that he can stun him with this time?
So there are a couple of responses to your question. Point number 1, very importantly, and this isn't highlighted enough, the referee stopped the fight in round 2 because of an eye poke that never was. So I encourage everyone to look this up. Kobe had his fist. I don't remember whether it was the left eye or the right eye, but Kobe had his hand near one of Usman's eyes, and Usman during the stoppage actually got his other eye checked. He got the other eye checked by the doctor, and he was holding the other eye. So that was clearly a fake eye poke. And these fights are about momentum, and who knows what would have happened. But I encourage everyone to just Google Usman versus Covington eye poke, and I want people to see this. And the second very important thing I want people to see is the second stoppage later in that round. Usman complained about a nut shot on him. And I think that was nowhere near nut. In fact, I think that was a liver shot. And that's another thing I want people to see. So these are two really, really momentum changing moments. I don't think Covington's complaint that the referee stopped the fight too early is valid. I think he was more or less done. And then what happens at times like these, when the referee lets it go on, people like us say that, look, he put the fighter's career and future at risk. So I think you need to always cut it and give the guy a second chance to continue his career. So that was a right call. But I think these two momentum stoppages and 5-minute breaks in round 2 were very important in the outcome of the fight. And the second point, the second answer to your question is that if you put a gun on my head, I would go with Usman. I think Kobe may be a more accomplished wrestler, but wrestling is one thing that needs a lot of strength. And I think physically, Usman has more muscle mass. I think he's a bigger guy than Kobe. I wouldn't be surprised if his walking around weight would be much more than Kobe. So I think he has less wrestling experience than Kobe, but I think he's a much stronger guy, which is a very important which is a very important raw material in wrestling. And I think, as you'll agree, Usman has improved his striking a lot. Usman went toe to toe with Masvidal, and he let the Usman went toe to toe with Masvidal, and he beat Masvidal in a striking contest. And Masvidal is probably one of the best strikers in that division. So I think Usman is a really well-rounded fighter now because he has the striking as well. So I would go with Usman, and that is my take on that fight.
Nice. I think that's an exciting one coming up as well. And I've got Usman as well. I think Kobe is fantastic. If he existed in any other time, he would have been the champion. But unfortunately, he is in the era of a man that I think is the future of the sport in terms of how far the evolutions come. Like GSP was the greatest welterweight of all time, but Usman I think is the new breed, the new animal in that division. He's been one of the most dominant fighters, and I think I saw some stuff on social media where they have lists. I think DC picked a few people, a bunch of other accomplished mixed martial arts experts picked a few people about most dominant fighters, and I was actually very surprised that Usman's not up there. If you think about the way he won the fight against Woodley and how far he's come with each and every one of his title defenses, he has won every minute of every round he has fought. I mean, the Kobe fight was very competitive, but I don't think Kobe was really winning. I mean, we're talking about times when Kobe was in trouble. He broke his jaw in the fight, things like that. But Usman has never been in trouble. I have never seen Usman in trouble in a fight.
Yeah, I think he lost round one to Kobe, definitely. Okay. I think in round two, there were moments when he had to do a fake eye poke and a fake nut shot. Right. And I think round three was when the momentum changed. I think even round three started very well for Kobe, but then Usman got some. So Kobe's strategy with Usman, that fight, actually both guys' strategy was to just stand and trade. There was zero head movement. There was zero footwork. Those guys just stood in front of each other and they bashed each other senseless. If you see even Usman's face at the end, that was the first time I saw Usman do a post-fight interview where he looked a little delirious. Not completely, but he was shivering, his voice wasn't straight.
He had taken some damage. Yeah, he had definitely taken some damage.
But still, he walked out, he ended the fight. So I agree with you completely. But the only guy who took him to a street, which he had never been before, I think was Covington. In fact, after Kobe Covington, I don't really see what they, if he beats Covington, I don't really see what they can do in that division. I think maybe they'll book something with Leon Edwards. And I think once Leon Edwards, I think Usman has Usman's improved much more than the time he beat Edwards last time. So once Edwards done, I think Usman maybe has to move up, move down, something like that, because he's lapped if he beats Kobe, there's a big if he beats Kobe, then I think he's just lapped everyone. I think he's done everyone, he's done the biggest guys in the division twice. And I think if Kobe wins, I think Kobe is going to try, and Kobe's a businessman, so I think he's going to try and go for the champ. He's already calling out Dustin Poirier, and he's really calling out Dustin Poirier. He's calling his wife a Jezebel, but Dustin's being smart. I don't think Dustin wants to do anything with Kobe in the octagon. Otherwise, he's going to tear that guy a new one. But yeah, I think it's going to be Usman, man. But that's my most awaited fight this year. Absolutely. Another one I really like is Gaethje versus Chandler. Gaethje versus Chandler is going to be a
all violence first team. Gaethje versus Chandler.
took the words out of my mouth. There's no fucking way that fight is going to go 5 rounds. Absolutely no way. Someone's going to get their head knocked off. If it goes 5 rounds, I don't think both fighters are ever going to be the same again. I think it's going to be this fight where they barely make it home. So that's another one. Actually, that's a super fight, man. That's a really, really good fight. Because of the styles, I think, because both guys need to just go for it. And I think that's an amazing fight. Can't wait for it. What card is it on?
The 268 card, Usman versus Covington.
Buddy, this is the best card of the fucking year, man. They could have made 3 cards with what they have on this one. Usman versus Kobe, Rose versus Zhang Weili.
Rose versus Zhang Weili. That's another fight, man. I am so excited for that fight.
That's a main event on its own. And then Justin Gaethje versus Michael Chandler. Of course, it's not a title fight, but it's like a title fight. So, yeah, two titles. Sorry. And there's Justin versus Chandler. Justin is as much. If people think Poirier deserves to be number one, then Justin has the right to think he deserves to be number one. He's done whatever Poirier has done. And so Sean's Luke Rockhold is back, and that's going to be a serious fight. Frankie Edgar versus Marlon Vera is going to be So Marlon Vera is the guy who beat Sean O'Malley, right? Yeah, I think Marlon Vera beat him, man. I think the way Sean O'Malley went down wasn't quite cool. I know a lot of people. Sean O'Malley didn't break his leg.
It was a tear in his leg or something like that. His leg just stopped working. Watch the fight again. His leg just stopped working in the fight and he couldn't move. He had to stand and fight. And then obviously that's not going to work.
But Kobe Covington needed to fight with his jaw as the furthermost part of his body, one of the guy with the heaviest hands, and as a really big guy, an absolute killer and the greatest of all time. He stood there, and even when he got knocked down, he popped back up.
Well, you can move with your jaw broken. You can't move with your legs cut out from under you. So Sean didn't stop punching, but he couldn't move. His leg was gone.
I think I'm going to have to watch that again because I don't think it was a McGregor I can't move. I don't think.
Oh, it was. It wasn't a break. It wasn't as bad as Conor McGregor's leg, but he tore something or something happened and he couldn't move. He just got stuck. So he had to stand with his back against the cage and do what he could without any foot movement. And if you've seen Sean O'Malley fight, he's a movement guy. I mean, it's footwork. It's a lot of angles and, things like that. Sean couldn't move, which is why that fight is a bit controversial, not, for Marlon Vera. Marlon won that fight. I mean, it's not his fault that Sean's leg gave out, but that was the case. Sean's leg gave out. There's a very visible problem in the fight, kind of like what happened to Jimmy Crute against Anthony Smith. But we'll see if that comes back. But those are all good fighters. We even have on the 267 card, I believe we have 2 title fights. But what do you think about Glover Teixeira taking on Jan Blachowicz? Do you really think Glover has much of a chance there?
No, I wouldn't think so, man. I wouldn't think so. So I actually think there are levels to this, and I think Jan Blachowicz has proved to be at the upper echelon, and I think Teixeira not because of his age and etc., but I think right throughout he probably wasn't at the level that Jan Blachowicz is. Jan Blachowicz dealt with Reyes quite nicely, and Jan Blachowicz dealt with Adesanya quite nicely.
Yeah, I mean, he was too big for Adesanya. I didn't think that was a good matchup, but I mean, Jan Blachowicz is a different animal. He's another sort of evolution of the game, in my opinion. He's new, improved version of what light heavyweights have been over the last few years. I mean, it's just going to keep getting better, right? You can't compare any sportsman from today from 15, 20, 30 years ago, not in a sport that's this young. And Jan Blachowicz is the future. People are going to be Jan Blachowicz or better in the future if they need to be a champion at this game. Aljo gets to run it back versus Peter Yan. I mean, and I don't even think it's fair to call Aljamain Sterling the champion. That was a bit of a freak incident. I don't know what Peter Yan was thinking in that fight.
My opinion on that one is that he just gave that fight away, man. He just gave that fight away. What a stupid thing to do. I think the momentum was seriously in his favor. He was kicking Aljo's ass, then starting to kick Aljo.
Oh, he was kicking Aljo's ass. I think he was just dominating Aljo. He was way ahead on those cards, and I think if the fight went on another round, he may even have finished it.
I think putting away, uh, I think putting him away is early is Aljo's only chance, man. That's what I think. So maybe a really nice kick or a really nice punch early on in the fight where he's got a lot more pop in his strikes. I think that's the time he has to get the job done. I think if the fight goes on, and I think if it boils down to skill, I think Peter Yan, no mercy Yan's gonna beat him, man. And you look at that man, whew, he's got no mercy, buddy. He's a absolute killer. He's got that same expression on his face. He's a complete asshole, and he just beats people up, man. That's what he does, and that's what he was doing to. That's what he's doing to Aljamain.
Hard man. That guy is a very hard man. You can tell, a guy from Siberia. He probably lived in the most, I mean, it's the most frigid, inhospitable place with the worst tasting food and probably, generally very difficult life conditions. So that man's tolerance level for discomfort, that man's idea of difficulty must be on another level. Now, I'm not saying Aljo's had an easy life, but I think there's levels to this game, and I think Peter Yan is. I was rooting for Aljo in the last fight, but after I saw what went down, I'm beginning to question whether Aljo is on the same level as Peter No Mercy Yan. In fact, I think if anybody has to beat Peter Yan, I really can't think of anyone right now who can challenge him and prove to be a challenge for that guy. Maybe TJ Dillashaw.
Maybe I think there are a few fights to be made. You can do TJ versus Cejudo versus Peter Yan is something.
Cejudo is definitely the man to call on for this, but Cejudo is retired. Let's see if Peter Yan can lure him back out of retirement, because Cejudo is still young, and Cejudo beat Mighty Mouse. I mean, Cejudo is Cejudo. He beat Dominic Cruz. He beat Mighty Mouse. He beat Moraes. He's the champ, the Olympic gold medalist. He's Triple C. So Cejudo, but I'm talking about active fighters who are in the weight class and in the UFC on the roster at this time. I can't think of anybody that's going to pose a serious challenge to Peter Yan.
I think Cejudo retired because, as you said, he's now become a star and he wants to. So you know what happens when these guys, they just want to fight the one-off fight and fight the sort of really special one. So I think if there's another really big star for Cejudo to fight, and I think the money's there, and I think he definitely go for it, man. I think Cejudo's retired in name. I don't think he wants to fight 2 times a year for a flat pay, going through all that shit that he needs to go through, fight camp, etc., etc. I think he wants to enjoy life, and I think when the big offer, the big fight comes by, I think he's going to take it. He wants to fight Volkanovski, is what I think he wants to do, because I think he's found another short guy. So even though Volkanovski is a bit bigger, I think it's a good matchup for him. I don't think Cejudo versus Max Holloway would be a good matchup for him, because there'd be a big reach mismatch over there. And I don't know if Cejudo would have the strength to take Holloway down, even if he has the skill to take, even if he has wrestling skill. So I think he's found a good match in Volkanovski, and I think that's what he said. But Volkanovski has a few hoops, a few things to run through, few hoops to cross before he gets into this whole this what do you call,
Yeah, I agree. Volkanovski, I think, could become somebody like that, but I don't know if that's a good idea for Cejudo. He's too big for Cejudo. I think if Peter Yan can pull enough eyeballs, then maybe Cejudo can take him on. I don't know, but like you said, I think for Cejudo, it was not worth the effort it takes for the kind of money he was getting paid and the kind of risk that he's taking with his health and his body. So it needs to be a red panty payday for Cejudo to come back. Otherwise, I don't think he's going to come back.
Absolutely. And I think Peter Yan, if he beats Aljamain versus Peter Yan versus Volkanovski, is a super fight, man. It's a super fight. That's a crazy fight. Who do you think is going to win, Ortega or Volkanovski?
That's a dead even. So there are certain fights where I'm comfortable giving my prediction or opinion. This is not one of those. This is a tough one to call because I know Volkanovski is a very rugged, very hardy fighter. He can take it, he can dish it. But I think I'll tell you where I think Brian has an edge. It didn't work versus Holloway, but if Brian gets a hold of him and he starts trying to attempt some submissions, because Brian can catch you from anywhere. Ortega's got people standing up. He just straight latches onto you while standing in the fight, and then you're in a standing guillotine. So I think that's the X factor. But otherwise, in terms of being tough and a guy that can grind it out, I think it's hard to bet against Volkanovski. So it's a very even fight. I'm scared to give my prediction. I think anything can happen, and that's what makes it so exciting.
I think Volkanovski is rugged, and so skill-wise, I would definitely give it to Ortega. His grappling skills are way better, like you pointed out, and he can hit a submission from absolutely anywhere. That's why he's called T-City. And but I think Volkanovski is a tougher guy, and I think Volkanovski was a 225-pound rugby player in Australia.
That's right. That's right. Volkanovski used to be 214 pounds at his heaviest weight. So he was basically a light heavyweight contender size. He was the same size as DC when he was playing rugby. And then as he got into MMA in his amateur career, he started cutting weight. And finally, when he joined the UFC, he came in at 145, which is the same as Max Holloway or where Conor McGregor started. But when he started, he was the same size as DC.
and a 225-pound athlete, not a 225-pound bum or 214 or whatever, you know what I mean? But 200-plus-pound, maybe a semi-professional athlete, but an athlete, not a bum who was. So that's not all fat that he had when he was 200 and something pounds. So I think that obviously gives a big, and I'm sure he cuts a lot of weight even now. I'm really sure he's changed his body composition, but there's no way a guy could be 220 pounds when he was young and now just be some whatever he is now. You know, that's just impossible. He actually fights in one division less than Poirier and Conor and all now, man. Oof, I think that guy must be cutting a lot of weight. I don't think he can continue this for long. Maybe that's something we should look up, but that's a shitload of weight to cut, man.
Yo, how the fuck was that guy? 215 pounds. That's like a 90 plus kilo athlete. Now he's fighting at 60 something kilos. Oh God, that's like nearly half his body weight, dude. That's like chopping off a leg for me or something.
Pictures of his rugby days, and he looks. I don't think his rugby was maybe too professional because he looks like that. But a lot of rugby players do. You don't have these. Rugby is not a sport where you have these 8% body fat guys running around anyways. So
mostly these big Samoans and Pacific Islanders, right? The guys that look like Mark Hunt and they look like Umaga, the Samoan bulldozer. You know, you have those kinds of guys.
Know anything about the game, but I think when you run, you need to have that mass that's also moving at a high speed.
I don't think they have any problems with weight cutting in rugby. Good stuff, man. I think we've covered a lot of good stuff. I think I've got everything I need. Is there anything else?
Done. If you think you got what you need, that was my objective this morning, bro. Bro, nice talking to you, buddy. Bye.
Bye.
Everybody out there, please like the channel, watch the videos, and subscribe.
Well, that's absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I loved having a conversation with you. As always, I hope you will be able to do this with me more often. I look forward to it. And for everybody out there, thank you for listening. Like, share, subscribe, and follow. I will see you in the next video.